Oh trust in you, Jesus. Oh, how sweet it is to trust in you, Jesus. Oh, how sweet it is to trust in you, Jesus.
guess that's my cue. I missed it. Well, welcome. It's so good to see all you guys this morning. What a wonderful word, right? I've been brewing on it for about 2 weeks now, so I'm excited to share it with you. Welcome to you guys here, but also welcome to everybody on live stream. If you're watching through Facebook, YouTube, whatever it is, go ahead and comment where you're at and where you're watching from. If you're in your living room, drinking your coffee and watching on your big screen, let us know so we can celebrate with you and pray for you. For those of you in the building, you may notice that we got some stuff going on. There is a white fine powder over everything as we tear down and reconstruct some of our kids' areas upstairs. There's good things going on. We're opening it up, making the classrooms bigger as we bring in more kids on Sundays. We're also going to do some stuff in the youth room, but that's all coming. And so I apologize if you walk to the restroom and get some dust on your shoes. We're in a period where we can't really fix some of that, but we are glad that you're here. If we have not met ever, whether through live stream or in person, my name's Matt Dixon, and I have the pleasure of being able to serve among you guys as the student director. And as you can see, I'm not Scott. I get to spend all my time hanging out with high school kids. I also I partner with Young Life, and so I get to go hang out with kids in their prime, in their places, get to go to the high school for lunch, and do all sorts of fun stuff out in the community. And so that's me. This morning, if you want to if you have your own Bible, flip to Matthew 25. If you don't have a Bible on you, there's some underneath the chairs, and I'm even reading from the same version, so we should all be on track. If you don't have a Bible to take home with you, you're more than welcome to take the one underneath the chair. We want you to have that. We have boxes and boxes of them, so send us the people that don't have Bibles. We want you guys to have the Word of God. So I've been praying over the past couple weeks for this Sunday, and my prayer has been, as we finalize kind of where we've been in the Bible the past few Sundays, we've been talking about what the church is and what it looks like and what it takes to be the church and what does that even look like. And so this morning we're talking about gospel-centered service in relation to what the church is. And so my prayer is just that we can sit still and listen to what God has to say about who we are and what we are when we walk through those doors and when we leave those doors to then take the gospel. And so this morning, I would like to start with I'd like to start with some math. I know you didn't show up for a math lesson this morning. I know Orion's giving me dagger looks. If you know me well, you know that I love science and I love math. In fact, I share that with my little brother who's sitting right there. We're a little nerdy when it comes to stuff, and so, I've been praying over this. I've been thinking over this, and for whatever reason, I came across this old law that has to do with math, and I thought, wow, I need to talk about this. And so the law is the law of averages. If you're in finances or in business, you may have heard this, or if you're in math, of course, you've heard it, but the law states, and I'm going to read it because it says, the average of a sequence of independent random events will converge to its expected value. If you're like me and you need everything back on a high school level, that just means things will happen because they're expected to happen. And that's pretty simple. If you flip a coin 100 times, the expected outcome is for you to have 50 heads and 50 tails. That's the way the math works out. It doesn't always work out that way in application, but again, if you flip a coin twice, one should be heads, one should be tails, and so the expected outcome comes to be. And I can stop there. I don't want to try to explain that anymore because I just stumble over it all. But when it becomes super important to us is when we start talking about our relationships with people and how we interact with them and the groups that we form. So Jim Rohn, who is a businessman, author, and motivational speaker, he has a famous quote that says, "You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with." He speaks on this law of averages also that we just talked about in relation to finances, and so this statement of you become or you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with derives kind of from that law. It's the expected outcome for you in your relationships is that you will become like the people you spend the most time with and you do the most with. And so taking those 2 things into account, we begin to see a pattern. Again, the people we spend our time with doing and living life are the people we become most like. And so like last week, we were at the end of the book of Matthew in chapter 28, and we talked about people groups. And Jesus said, go into the nations, and Scott describes nations as, in our context, as being these people groups that we're a part of. And the metrics that measure them are, you could measure it by income levels. We can measure it by the cost of our homes, the areas that we live in, the geographical locations, the languages that we speak, the color of our skin. These are all, in the actual nations that we live in, these are all things that we consider people groups. And so Jesus is saying in Matthew 28, the Great Commission, he's saying, go into those people groups and make disciples. It's pretty clear cut. And so this is not, of course, a new occurrence. In fact, and this made me laugh as I was reading up on some of descriptions for people groups. Paul describes the Cretan people in Titus as always being liars, evil beasts, and gluttons. He's labeled this people group, and I really hope that anyone looking into my life and looking at the people that I spend my time with, my family, my friends, I really hope that they don't describe me that way. But the reality is that these people, they lied, they were evil, and they had gluttonous activities. And so for better or worse, that was their people group, and that was how it was described. And so this funny thing starts to happen the more time you spend with people. These isms form, and we've talked. I know Scott's talked about isms before. Your families have them. You and your coworkers have them. My family has them, and they occur here at Stonewater. We have our own Stonewater isms, and the speech patterns and inside jokes and the nods and grins and various body languages that we use to communicate with each other that to another people group may not seem like much, whether it's a nod of the head, which is an Indian thing, or the Italian, whatever this means, usually confusion, right? They mean more to their people groups than they mean to anybody else. And the best example I probably have, or actually I do have, are my kids. We laugh all the time, my wife and I laugh because for better or worse, my kids have picked up on some of the isms that I have. Probably my favorite one, well, there's a tie there. When I drive, I try to use Siri to send my text. I'm fortunate to have a vehicle that can listen to me and then send that text out. And so I text, Carly all the time. And what's funny is when you allow it to send, right? You say yes to its question of, can I send this? There's a short pause, and then there's a prompt, done. So what has started to occur is anytime I send a text, everybody in my car says done in unison, and it's hilarious. I've never, I haven't ever experienced it anywhere else, and I love it. I wish that people that were receiving the text could hear the after effects that happens in my car. Another really fun one is any drink that I have is now considered Daddy's Coke. When my little Claire Bear started talking not too long ago, she picked up on the fact that I have this habit of stopping and getting Diet Coke when I'm out and about. She wanted to know what it was. I said it was Diet Coke. And so now the derivative of that is Daddy's Coke, and it has taken over any drink that I have. And so, like, your family may not call all of your drinks Daddy's Coke, but one of the isms of the Dixon family is that's what it's called. There's other things like obscure movie quotes. I don't even realize I'm doing it most of the time, but I guarantee 40% of my conversations are reflective of movies that I've seen in the past. We also have these overly exaggerated exclamations. Some people will call them sarcasm. I don't like that word, so I call them overly exaggerated exclamations. And there's just some other ones, like the rhythm of our night routine and just the things that we do at night leading up to bedtime. The list just kind of goes on and on and on of the things that make our little family people group unique. And you guys, if you start to look for them, you start to see them. I don't know if any of you guys remember having these friend relationships, right, in high school, where, I'll just give an example. Growing up, I used to have, I played football, used to have all the linemen over at the house, and we would just, cook and do all these random things, and for whatever reason, by the time the night ended, we were all talking in various accents. I don't know why it happens, I don't know why it ends up going that way, but we were always goofing off, and, you've got one guy in an Indian accent, you've got one guy, and just any number of them. And so those are the isms of some of my friends' groups, and they're just kind of fun. And these isms happens because in the coin flips of life, if we do the things enough with each other, around each other, living life together, then that time spent, it's just expected for these isms to form. And at that point, it's pretty much just math. And so one of the biggest people groups, and the reason we're all gathered here today, right, is our church people group. When you walked through that door, whether it was your first time visiting or whether you've been here since Stonewater was founded or before, I know we've got some people that have hung out for that long. That's incredible. And you have become part of our people group. We have our isms, we have our expectations, we have our boundaries. They don't stop at the walls, but we are a people group here at Stonewater Fellowship. And as I was exploring these ideas of this law of averages and where you spend your time and the people you spend your time with become who you become, I started looking at what the world establishes as its people groups, and then I looked at what the church has established as its people groups. And before I even say anything more, I'd like to thank all of the people in here serving, whether it's in Kids on Mission, whether or not you've been in and out of Young Life, and whether or not you hang out to do food bags with us afterwards, which we'll talk about later. But I just wanted to say that before I say what I'm going to say next, because when I look at these people groups that have formed in both society and church, I see a problem. And so I wanted to lead with, I love everybody that's serving here, and I thank you, and we're very much appreciative of it. This is more of a blanket term for what the Western church has become. And I see this problem, and it's a tension problem. And that is because you and I, and every other believer in existence, is called to more than just Sunday event attendees. We're called to be more than a body in a church building for an hour or so on Sundays. Speaking of which, I don't plan on speaking that long, but if I get to the 40-minute mark, somebody's allowed to come kick me off stage. But if you're sitting here this morning and you know nothing about a calling, you know nothing about expectations, you know nothing about church, if the word salvation scares you because you've never heard it before, I want you to know this morning that before we even get into the text that you were created for a reason, and that God loves you, I love you, and every person in here that professes to be a follower of Christ wants to know you and know your isms, and we want you to be a part of who we are. And so, saying that, I would like to say in 1890, Pastor Frederick Huntington said, "It is not scientific doubt, it's not atheism, it's not pantheism, it's not agnosticism, that in our day and in this land is likely to quench the light of the gospel. It's not those things. It is a proud, sensuous, selfish, luxurious, church-going, hollow-hearted, prosperous person." I did the math. This was 133 years ago. And there were some isms that had been formed. There were some cultural behaviors that were starting to form. And Pastor Huntington didn't like them. He pointed them out. He's like, people are not being who they were created to be, and instead we've become comfortable with, just showing up. And those behaviors are, of course, not the good ones. It's not the ones that we want to have. And so this leads my heart to hurt this morning, because I too, even though this was 133 years ago, multiple lifetimes ago, or two lifetimes ago, I see it even more today in our Western church, in our church. And what I see is a people group that has been set aside to be more than, but we are not more than. In fact, we're not, you can't tell us apart from the people groups of the world. And that makes me very sad. And so this morning, as we turn back to the text to try to break it down a little bit, I know on screen it's like 31 to 46. That's like a lot of words. It's a big chunk of text. Fortunately, 12 of those verses kind of repeat themselves, and we'll see that in a little bit. But before we get into the actual text, I think a little setting and some vibes need to be established, because Jesus is in a crazy place right now. He's just entered Jerusalem for the final time in his life. The story goes that he was on a donkey being paraded into Jerusalem, singing praise, and he was being praised. Well, the reality is, a very short time from now, that praise will turn to people calling for him to be crucified, and for him, for a very bad man to be released in place of Jesus being crucified. And so this is kind of the final calm, really, before the storm hits. And Jesus is kind of laying out time, or he's spending time laying out some things for his disciples. He's teaching them about the deeper meanings of like what the kingdom of God is and the context of his eventual return. And so at the beginning, or actually all of chapter 25 has three separate parables. The first two I'm not going to hit on very long, or else we'd be here for triple the amount of time. But they are super important, I think, because they come in a parable box set. I grew up with this box set of the original trilogy of Star Wars. And so when I think of Matthew chapter 25, I think of these three parables, one of them being of the 10 virgins, and the second one being of the talents that were left behind for people, and then the third being our text today. So in the first one, being the parable of the 10 virgins, Jesus highlights the importance of staying prepared for his eventual coming back, and the leaving behind of those that were unprepared. They were given lamps, and there was an expectation that these lamps be filled with oil, or else they're kind of useless. And so some of them did not fill their lamps. Some of them took extra so that they could fill them in any sort of emergency. And when it came time to leave to use the lamps, the 5 that did not have oil had to then go buy oil, and the event passed, and they missed out. And so Jesus is saying, be prepared, I'm coming. and I have something set out for you. And so the second parable being the parable of the talents. This person of importance leaves talents or money with his servants. They are expected to then go use that, and when he returns, there's an expectation of building, of not just taking it, but building upon it. And Jesus here is saying that there's two pathways: truly knowing him and building his kingdom with the talents that he bestows, or the other pathway simply that leads to simply being excluded from the reward of abundance because you were not obedient to the things that he set aside for you. And so finally, we land on the third parable, which is at the end of chapter 25, and it's the text that Emanuela read us earlier, and it's labeled the final judgment. And so Matthew chapter 25, verses 31 and 32 kind of go like this. When the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, then he will sit on his glorious throne. Before him will be gathered all the nations, and will separate people from one another as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. I'd like to sit for a second and appreciate the imagery here, because this isn't a dead Roman little g god, example being Helios. He's not rolling up in his fizzled out chariot with some flames spray painted on the side. This is the God, this is Jesus, of which all things were created through and for, is the Lord of lords and the King of kings in all of his glory. The best of our world pales in comparison to the image of Jesus coming with his host of angels. We are fortunate to live in a very beautiful place of Texas. Carly and I talk about it all the time. We're driving down the road and we look up and you've got a sunset painted across the sky. You've got hills, and we go over a river every day that we come home, and we live, within driving distance of a lake. It's just I spent a lot of mornings out on the dam watching the sunrise before Carly and I met, and there's not a whole lot in this world that compares to something like that. But the reality is that's nothing in comparison to this image of Jesus returning and taking his throne. And so just wanted to revel in that a little bit. I won't even try to paint the picture more because, one, I'm not artistic. I can't paint. But also, even if I could muster some words up, words aren't going to paint the picture well either. And so, but I want you to try to think of this heavenly consort, right? And he is going to take his throne in front of everyone. And when I say everyone, I don't just mean everyone here. I don't even mean everyone in Canyon Lake or Texas or the United States or even just the world currently. It is everyone to ever have existed in all of creation. And I don't know if you've ever watched one of those videos that it takes you from 1 all the way through 1 million, and it trying to give you perspective of the difference between one person versus 1 million people versus 1 billion. Currently, I think we passed the 8 billion mark not too long ago. I think last month I read something about it. That is a lot of people. That's more than I can count to for sure. And every single one of us are going to be sitting in front of Jesus when he sits on his throne. And in the second part of the verse, it says, what is he going to do next? He's going to separate people from one another as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And the important thing is it's from people from the people. It's not of people to of people. It's everybody sitting here at some point as our people group will be separated from each other. Some of us will sit on the left hand and some of us will sit on the right hand, and we'll talk more about what that means in a second. But I think it's important to make the distinction of from each nation and not group by group. The understanding here, of course, is that Jesus will pull apart the people groups that we found ourselves and made ourselves a part of. And this means that all of the wealthy will be separated from each other. All of the poor will be separated from each other. All of every HOA and every book club will split and go in two different directions. The citizens of the United States of America, the great United States of America, will all be pushed in either the right direction or the left direction. And we will be separated from each other, your friends and your coworkers, your family and my wife and my kids. We will stand before Jesus and we will be pulled apart. Hopefully not. Hopefully we get sent to the same side. But every definitive culture and people will be pulled in one of two directions. And they will either be among sheep or they will be among goats. And so here in Revelation chapter 7, we see another description of this host of people. I couldn't get enough of this imagery in my head. And so up here we have Revelation chapter 7, verse 9 and 10. And it says, "After this I looked, and there before me was a great multitude that no one could count, from every nation, tribe, people, and language, standing before the throne and before the Lamb. They were wearing white robes and were holding palm branches in their hands, and they cried out in a loud voice, 'Salvation belongs to our God who sits on the throne and to the Lamb.'" And this is another perspective. It's looking over the crowd of sheep, and it says, from every nation, color, and tribe, from every language. And so what I want to point out here is it says all tribes and people and tongues. It doesn't say that they're separated out by color. They're not color-coded. They're not name-coded. They're not. We are not in that way. But the beauty of diversity is not lost when Jesus separates us into our new people groups here. And there's beauty there, but there's also some scary aspects of that because as we start to look at our isms, right, our cultural boundaries, our traditions and actions that separate us as people, we don't lose those. And so, like, what does it look like to be a sheep? And so, it's wild to think that every established group of people in all of history and all of creation will be a mix of goat and sheep. I laugh at this because I think of, I was fairly involved with the livestock show growing up, and I giggle a little bit because I didn't like the goats. They tried to eat my pants every time you walk by. They try to, they chew on everything. They look at you sideways, and they're just, yeah. So, and of course, then the lambs were soft and cuddly, and they didn't try to eat your boots while you walk by, and so. But anyway, so we will all be separated into these two groups. We'll either be a sheep or we'll be a goat, and we're going to be sitting on one side, one of two sides. And so this is where verse 33 comes in, and it says, "And he will place the sheep on his right, but the goats on the left." And at this point, or if not probably earlier, some of you may be asking, well, what in the world qualifies me as a sheep or a goat then? If all of creation, all of the people of creation have these people groups, right, and you're being pulled apart, what are the parameters, or at least I ask, what are the parameters? What's the list? Where are the guidelines here? And Scott left me some notes and to kind of prepare for some of these verses. And in those notes, it says that in the four gospel books, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, sheep are mentioned 36 times. And every single time it refers to sheep, it is referring to those that belong to him, to Jesus, those that know him and listen to his voice. Essentially those that are his followers and have learned from him. And he says, "For my sheep will hear my voice, and they follow me." Throw in a little bit of biblical history and trivia here, but the first Christians by name were dubbed Christians by citizens of Antioch in the early first century. The followers of Christ, after he ascended back into heaven, were acting and talking and being like Jesus. And so this word Christian translates to little Jesus, or followers of Jesus, like Jesus. And so So this morning, Jesus is painting a picture for us, stating that the separation of the goats and the lambs is Jesus separating out his followers and professing believers from those that don't truly know him. And those that are right with God through grace, through their faith, and those that are not right and separated from him. And he visualizes this by placing the sheep on the right. And congratulations to those of you sitting on the right this morning. And then he places the goats on the left. And so I'm sorry. Fortunately, this morning, our seating arrangement doesn't determine whether or not we're going to heaven or hell. Thankful for that. But in the next, so getting to where we're at now, in the next 12 verses, Jesus is going to lay out 6 different expressions of our brokenness as humanities. And he lays these 6 out. And he not only does he describe them, but these are the 6 expressions that Jesus himself stepped into completely, and what he was known for, the love that he showed, and the actions that he did. And as followers of Jesus, we should be willingly, automatically, and unknowingly following Jesus into doing these things. And that's going to mark our service to others as being gospel-centric instead of people-centric. And so if I had to label the next 12 verses as a coin, one side, of course, would have the head of a sheep, and the other one would be tails, so it would be the butt of a goat. And don't ask me why I wrote it like that. That's just kind of the image that I had in my head of a coin. And it ended up in the script, and now we're visualizing the head of a lamb and the butt of a goat. So in verse 34 through 40, Jesus kind of lays out these 6 expressions, right? These 6 things, these 6 themes of service. And he says to those on his right, "Come, you who are blessed by the Father, inherit the kingdom prepared from you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me." And then those righteous on the right will answer him, saying, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you drink? And when did we see you a stranger and welcome you, or naked and clothe you? And when did we see you in prison and visit you?" And the king will answer them, "Truly I say to you, as you did to one of the least of these of my brothers, you did it unto me." And so firstly, of course, he lays out 6 things. He lays out hunger and thirst, right? Physical attributes. He lays out strangers and clothing, being naked and being clothed, and being sick and in prison. And these are the things that he's qualifying his people as doing, right? And doing them unknowingly, because they had to ask him, "When did we see you and do these things to you? We have not seen you in these situations and did these things to you." Firstly, I don't mistake these 6 things as Jesus saying you can buy your way into being in the sheep club by simply doing good works. Or, on the flip side, by simply professing that you believe who he is. Because what do we find when Jesus confronts Legion is that Legion believed and knew who he was, but did not follow him. And so there's a crossroads here. And at that crossroads, both of these things, good works and belief, have to be present, because one of them cannot be true without the other, and true to who Jesus is and what he's asking. And so when I look at these people groups, I have started to pick out that it seems to be pretty easy in today's world, especially with media and the way that media works and the way that we can post anything we want to an entire host of people. It seems pretty easy to get trapped in this process of assisting the marginalized, assisting the people that need, assisting the people that need Jesus, and completely missing Jesus. We can spend a whole lot of time doing these things, and we have never once looked at the face of Jesus and made it our prerogative to follow him. And I think it's likewise easy, and this is where it hits close to home. I think it's easy to profess to know Jesus, but live a life absent of the exact actions that Jesus spent his entire life doing. And so this crossroads, meeting in the middle, right? We should be doing these things. There should be the fruits of our faith and our belief. Jesus' MO was saving the lost among all people. His MO was not to come and bring water to give somebody who was thirsty, or food specifically to somebody that was hungry, alone and separate from. He did that by giving food to the hungry and drink to the thirsty, by inviting strangers and sinners in to his life. He clothed the naked and visited the sick and imprisoned. But he didn't just do those things. He did it knowing that he also had the eternal needs, the solution to the eternal needs that they had. And here are the 6 practical needs, of course, of all humanity. We see it everywhere. We can go down the street and see 3 or 4 examples of people that we need to be pouring our resources into. But we can't answer that calling and leave the declaration of the gospel behind, because then we have gone and done our own thing on our own time with ourselves at the center, and the gospel, which should be the center of our service, has been left behind. And so we cannot just give food to hungry people or give water to thirsty, refuge to strangers, or clothing to large numbers of naked people. We can't just only visit the sick and provide the needs for those impoverished in their families. Doing these things doesn't separate us from places like the CRRC right down the road, who provide food and water and clothing and nourishment for people who don't have it. They do great things for this community. And there's examples all over the place of these organizations that give and do without the common denominator being Jesus. So if we're not taking the gospel with us to these people and their needs, then we are no different than the next 501c3. And so groups all over the world are making it their agenda to do these things. But to make a difference, we have to have an urgency to not just physically or emotionally provide. We have to take with us the reality that we have the cure for everything that everybody has, and it's not water, it's not physical food, it is the gospel. It's Jesus and who he is. It is the bread of life. It is the drink that will forever quench people's thirst. It is refuge for people and hope and adoption into the family of God. It is letting people know that they have the opportunity to be clothed in the righteousness of God through Jesus. To let those captive know that Jesus has come to set them free of those shackles of sin. These are crazy ideas, and understandably, I think the sheep were a little bewildered. They had their heads down, they had their agenda, and they did it well. And so when they looked up and Jesus is saying that they've done all these things for him, they're confused. I think I'd be a little confused, and I hope that I'm a little confused when I get here and I'm separated out, and Jesus is saying, you did these things, and I'm able to ask the question, when did I do those things to you? I've never seen you in person. I've never seen you naked and put clothes on you. I've never seen you hungry. But I have, through extension, through the people and the least of these that need. And so They were so busy following Jesus, loving the lost, and being good stewards of their various resources. And these aren't just not just physical and emotional resources; they're spiritual resources, because we have that. We have that gift, and so then we kind of flip the coin, and so this is kind of where it repeats itself here. But we see the but side of the coin. And we look at it, and at verse 41 it says, "Then he will say to those on his left, 'Depart from me, you cursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me no food. I was thirsty, and you gave me no drinks. I was a stranger, you did not welcome me. Naked, and you did not clothe me. Sick and in prison, and you did not visit me.'" And similarly, they're going to answer, very confused, "Lord, when did we not see you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or naked or sick or in prison and did not minister to you?" And he said, "Truly I say to you, as you did not do it to one of the least of these, you did not do it unto me." When I read this, I have this oozing feeling, this pride here. It just oozes and carries this sickly smell. It's like a wound, right, that has festered for a while. And so Jesus is not saying accursed because these people did not do the things that he has listed. And they even question him, "When did we not do that? Like, where were you for us to do that to?" And they completely went way over their head. The fact is, he didn't appear. It was through his people. And they're not being called accursed, like I said, because they didn't specifically do these things. In fact, I'm sure a lot of the goats in the building may live lives full of giving and doing and going to provide for people. And so the reality here is that the goat group will be full of people that never met at that crossroads of belief and action. They never stood there and looked in both directions. They went and did, but they never believed, or they sat in comfort and professed to believe, but didn't go and do. And so Jesus says, he's like, "Look, all of you over here, the accursed ones, the ones who never fully knew me." Jesus says they will go away into eternal punishment, and then likewise to the sheep on his right, that they have eternal life. So that kind of wraps up the text this morning. But I'd like to circle back to this little discussion we had of rhythm and isms, to the actions and traditions that define the people groups that we don't belong to. Among your coworkers, among your people group at work, is there room for the gospel? Have you made a place in your isms, in your traditions, in the way that you walk and talk to allow for the gospel to do its job? Or are you simply walking in the isms of those people groups? In your neighborhood, is it an epicenter for the gospel? Are you going out and taking it to all of your neighbors? And when's the last time you had a conversation with your neighbors? And let me back up. I'm not asking you specifically. I'm asking myself, because when I'm sitting here reading these things, I'm like, am I doing this? Is my apartment over at River Ranch is an epicenter for the people around me to know Jesus? Do they, through my interactions with other tenants, is it through my picking up of the dog poop rather than just leaving it, which is a really bad issue? Are my isms speaking more than I want them to, or am I leaving room for the gospel to work? And similarly, as we fumble, right, with the small amount of change in our center console at the red light, does the homeless man that you're about to hand 50, 60, 70 cents, does he know that you're giving it to him because he's loved and that he has a place in heaven if he just accepts a simple gift? So really, the main question I'm asking is, do your isms reflect Jesus? Because we're called to more. We're called to being more than just a body and a church. As a people group following Jesus, we're called to be more. And so throughout 2023, around here, there's going to be more. And so, like, if something said here tonight or today hits home, and you're like, okay, maybe some of my isms need to change. Maybe some of my, maybe some of your people need to change. Maybe your 5 people are not allowing you to have room to profess the gospel. Do your friend groups need the language change? Does your home life need to be steered towards love and not control? Do your isms reflect Jesus? But so here at Stonewater, we have a number of ways for you guys to jump in. If you're like, yes, Jesus, okay, so how do I do the do part? How do I jump in? Here shortly, we're going to be packing 150 food bags. We partner with First Baptist and I think 3 or 4 other churches in packing like thousands of food bags so that the resource management teams at the various schools can then take them to kids who have none. And so an important part, and one of my last points, I think, that I want to leave you with is whether it's feeding the hungry, reading your Bible with somebody, bread of life, whether it's getting somebody a drink or simply sitting and listening, whatever it looks like for you to go in your people groups and profess the gospel, we want you guys to be involved with whatever processes we can help cultivate. And so, like, these kids have nothing. And so the basis of what Jesus is calling us to do is to be really good resource managers, whether that's time, money, clothing, space. And so as a church, we're called to do that, right? And so these kids labeled by these resource management, they go home to nothing. They go home hungry and thirsty. And a lot of times, unfortunately, they go home to homes that are split homes, just varying degrees of ups and downs. And so we partner to do that. Also, we have, in the coming months, we're going to be going into prison through the Kairos ministry. We're taking the hope of the gospel to people literally chained up and lacking in freedom. We also, every year, we've got things like Operation Christmas Child that pop up. I think we did 360-something bags. 312. So we had, if you've been with us a little while, you saw a giant Christmas tree made out of Operation Christmas Child. Those boxes are taking toys and necessities, but it's taking hope to kids who have nothing. They have even less than some of the kids labeled living below the poverty line here on the lake. Some of them don't even have floors to the homes that they live in. And so this is kind of our opportunity to have a hand in that. Also, every week, house churches meet and evaluate how to take the gospel to their neighborhoods. If you want to be a part of that and you want to plant one and you want to jump in on that, there's plenty of opportunity for that to happen. And the people groups we all find ourselves in, whether they're here, out there, whether they're at work or at the movies, or whatever you find being common denominators with the people that you interact with, these people are full of people calling out, and they need physical but ultimately spiritual needs. And so, like, my main takeaway for today is we need to answer that calling. I mean, we need to do it better than we're doing it now. And so my last little bit, and this actually happened this morning, so I was adding it to my little outline this morning. And so around 1 a.m., I was sitting on the couch in my living room, and I heard a faint cry. Of course, the kids are supposed to be asleep. At first, I thought it was our 9-month-old puppy that we have. We have a little schnauzer. I thought it was him crying from the bedroom because he's codependent on me for whatever reason. It was not. It was actually my little 3-year-old, Kason. So I slowly crept into his room. I opened the door, and I saw a little head pop out. He's half asleep. He's not processing, but he looked at me, and he said, "Daddy, I have to pee." And so this is exciting. We're in these stages where he's finally, potty trained a little bit. He's not, he's able to wear underwear all the time. It's incredible. And so this is one of those moments where I'm like, oh, this is awesome. I just happened to be awake. I hadn't gone to sleep yet. And so I helped him go to the bathroom. And as I was, helping him back into his room and getting him covered up, I had these images flashing through my mind of the years to come for him, of the time that he's going to be spending in my family people group, and of the time that he's going to be spending here in this Stonewater people group, in the schools that he's going to go to, in the friendship circles that he's going to have. And it kind of knocked me to my knees. These images they kind of expanded a little bit. They included all of my little family. I say little family, I've got a lot of family. In fact, the kids have 5 sets of grandparents, and so Christmas was fun. But I've got the first 2 rows over here, 3 rows filled with friends and family that are very close to me. This image keeps expanding, and I've got every person that I've ever met, all the people that I know the names of, all of the groups that I've ever been a part of, the football team, the TLU groups I was in when I was in college there, the friend groups that I try to maintain now that don't really happen, unfortunately, but all of my friends, all of my family, all of my acquaintances, all of my enemies, right? Every group I'd ever belonged to. And so then my imagination expanded it to what all of creation must have looked like standing before the throne of Jesus. And I had this moment where I realized I won't get to make the choice for Kaysen to choose Jesus. I will be standing next to him when the time comes. Likewise, we can't make decisions for anybody in our lives. And while I don't get to make that choice for them as much as I would like to, and it hurts, right? It hurts my heart a little bit. I can make sure that the culture I create at home, the culture I create among my friends and the other people groups, that it has the gospel at the center. And for whatever happens 10, 15, 20 years from now, I can at least stand on the fact that Jesus was always in charge of that. And then everybody else has to choose yes or no. And if you don't know what that yes or no is, as I invite like Emanuela and her team back up to lead our final song, I'm going to read this gospel liturgy or this gospel presentation that we kind of condensed and wrote down. If you've never heard this before, this is a great story. And if you know me and you know me well, you know that I love a good story. And so I'm going to read it. And so like as I'm reading this and as the music starts and I'm going to leave the stage, we're going to have people come up. Our prayer team's going to be up at the front. Like if something clicks with you through this, don't hesitate. Like if you're being called to something, we want you to answer that calling. And so it goes like this. Every time the church gathers together, either large or small, we explicitly and overtly declare the gospel. We do this for 2 reasons. Those that have been saved by grace through faith can be refreshed and reminded of the grace and loving kindness of God. And 2, so that anyone who is hearing this for the first time will hear clearly the work of God and have a clear opportunity to then respond to that, because there is a response in faith. And so here now is the gospel. In the beginning, when this entire thing called life got started, many, many years ago, God created all things, and he created man in his own image. God and man were in perfect relationship with each other, and God gave man one boundary, that he should not eat of a particular tree. Man looked at that fruit and saw that it looked like it could taste good, and was told that it would make man like God. The instructions from God started to not make sense, and man made a choice independent of God, separate from God, to begin to live a life that made sense to himself, and took a bite of the fruit of the tree. In doing this, he rebelled completely against God. When he rebelled against God, his relationship with God was broken, and with this rebellion came death. The Bible calls this rebellion from God sin. And each one of us is born into this same broken state, and because of this, we naturally rebel against God, and because of our own rebellion, we are broken, and our relationship with God is broken. This brokenness overflows into every area of our life. It's broken our ability to have a relationship with God, our ability to have a healthy relationship with each other, and our ability to have a healthy relationship with the created world around us. Even our ability to have a healthy relationship with God himself. And so because of that, we have a desperate need of having this brokenness repaired and put back into right. The only one capable of repairing this degree of brokenness is God. And so the gospel, the good news, is God putting back all the things right into relationships with themselves and through the person and work of Jesus Christ. God restores people back into a right relationship with themselves by calling all men to faith, and he restores, recovers, redeems, and reconciles back into place this relationship with him. Those people who turn their life over to him and living faith in what? Faith in the historical facts that God in his loving kindness provided all of mankind an open door of being right in that relationship. But he took on flesh and he dwelt among us as a man named Jesus. And Jesus, who was fully God and fully man, lived a morally perfect life, never rebelling against God like we have. And as a completely innocent person, freely accepted the sentence of death for us on a Roman cross. Faith in the fact that when Jesus' blood was being poured out on the cross and that he died, faith that he as God paid the price for our rebellion and satisfied the wrath, and in doing so, all of our sin and rebellion against God is completely forgiven. It's wiped clean. Faith in the historical event that 3 days after his death, God raised Jesus from the dead by the same power that created all things. In these two acts of dying and being raised from the dead, Jesus defeated sin and death once and forever for all of those who believe. Church, we're called to more, because that couple of paragraphs right there needs to be the undercurrent of everything that we do. And if it's not, he lays it out for us. There's two destinations, and I don't want to be standing next to Kason and Claire and my wife and all of my family and have to watch, because I didn't take the gospel with me, watch one of them be torn in a different direction. So that's all I got.
Just getting started. I hit a wall. You just walk through. When I face the mountain, you are the maker. It's gotta move. When I'm out of faith, you are still faithful. When I'm at my worst, you are still good. In all of my questions, you are the answer. It all points to you. You're the God of the breakthrough. When I'm breaking down, you'll be working a way through. When there's no way out, this one thing I know, you're still on your throne. So whatever I'm feeling, still got a reason to praise, praise, praise. down.